So I've mentioned before on these videos that I used to play the trumpet when I was in elementary school. I played the trumpet in 5th grade for the whole year. Um, and I find that somewhat pertaining to this video because this is going to be me talking about the movie Soul, which came out in 2020, the Pixar movie Soul. And, you know, jazz and music in general are a big part of this movie. And so background on why I played the trumpet for anyone that hasn't seen other videos where I've mentioned it. My dad played the trumpet when he was a kid, and he played it, I believe, all the way through high school. It might have been middle school through high school. My dad also used to play football, but he had a football injury where he had a screw in his elbow, so he couldn't do that anymore. So he just played the trumpet instead and was in the band. And so when I was in 5th grade here in Nebraska, generally when you're in 5th grade, they end up having you, 4th or 5th grade, they have you pick an instrument for you to play, and you play that for, you try that out and play it for the whole year. And I picked the trumpet because that was what my dad had played, and I figured it would be a way for him and I to kind of bond. Also, it had been not too long after my parents had gotten a divorce, so it was like just a way for dad and I to spend time together and practice together. So that was kind of a bonding thing there for us. I did play the trumpet all the way through the year. I believe at the beginning of the school year, I was one of like 3 or 4 trumpets, and by the end of the year, I think I was like either just the last one or there was like one other one by the end of the year. So I made it all the way through the school year in regards to playing the trumpet, because it's just like, I'm gonna do this, and I got all the way through. And I enjoyed practicing with my dad. We would sit in our kitchen and practice. Don't know how much our dog particularly enjoyed that, but we would practice in the kitchen. And we did the recitals and everything like that at school and such. But after 5th grade, I was just like, I don't really feel like trumpet is for me anymore. And my dad was perfectly fine with that. And there were other things that I had more of an interest in. I had more of an interest in art, and my interest in anime beyond like Sailor Moon and such hadn't really started at that point in time, because I wasn't quite aware that like Sailor Moon and like Card Captors and Digimon and stuff were like a different kind of anime or a different kind of show than, like, I don't know, Scooby-Doo, because I was a kid and I hadn't realized that yet. But I found other things, and the reason I go into that is because in this movie, in Soul, they talk a lot about what people's spark is, and they talk about purpose and things like that, and I am going to talk about that as we go through the movie. So the premise of the movie is Joe Gardner, who is this middle school band teacher in New York, and I've straight up front, Joe is African American. This movie delves quite a bit into like the African American community in regards to certain aspects of that. And Pixar, when they were making it, had like a cultural trust where they talked to lots of different people in regards to trying to make sure that they had this be as accurate as possible in regards to like this kind of neighborhoods and family dynamics and stuff like that like Joe would have had. I believe Joe is supposed to be in his 40s or so, or late 30s into his 40s range, if I remember correctly. I don't remember if they ever state his age. But despite his job in regards to being a band teacher, which he does not really seem to enjoy. Side note, and I haven't watched the movie many times. I haven't watched the movie too many times, but at the beginning of it, because like Pixar and Disney will do like the opening bit where they'll show like, the Disney castle and everything, and they'll play, When You Wish Upon a Star and everything. They have that played very badly by what was probably a real middle school band. So it's like, it takes you a second to register that that's what they're playing, but that's what they play over like that part of the opening title screen parts there, which is kind of funny. And then you go in and you see the kids playing, and Joe is not having a very fun time with this and everything. And one of the things that happens is one of the students, I think it's Katie is her name. She plays the trombone, and she kind of gets into playing it, and some of the kids laugh at her afterwards, and Joe says, no, that's fine. Getting into the music is a good thing when it comes to playing. And he explains that his story in regards to how he kind of discovered jazz and music. And it was like when he was about 12 years old, his dad took him into this nightclub to show him jazz. And when he was a kid, he did not care about jazz. And he goes in and he ends up seeing this, jazz musician on the piano playing. And Joe just sees him and he's just like struck with how he plays and how into the music he is and everything. And that kind of starts Joe's love of music. From there, Joe finds out from, the principal of the school that he's, offered, full-time position at the school, covers, insurance and benefits and, all this other stuff. And he doesn't seem very happy about this because he more wants to become this full-time musician as opposed to this full-time teacher. And it's just something that, like, he's always wanted to be a musician ever since he was, 12. And, his dad was a musician and he got, like, his love of jazz from his dad. And, he just is not sure about whether or not he wants to, accept the job of being the school teacher full-time. And what we end up seeing is he goes to his mother, Libba, who owns this, she owns like a tailoring shop. And she is much more worried about making sure that he is financially secure as opposed to him, gigging every night or going and doing all these different things where he's trying to play, play his music to earn money and everything because, he's been rejected multiple times and she's seen that. And so she's very much like wants her son to be able to have be financially secure, not have to worry about so much stuff, which is understandable. Most parents want their child to be financially secure, and I hear my dog barking in the background, so I apologize if you hear that. There's not really a dog in this movie. There's a cat coming up in a little bit. But what ends up happening is Joe gets this call from one of his former students, and it's who is now fully grown and is like a drummer in a band and, or at this jazz club, and he ends up finding out that Dorothea Williams, who is this very famous saxophonist and everything, that Joe just adores her music and everything, and they find out Joe finds out that she needs a piano player for the night, and if if Joe can show up and play and, be good enough, then she'll let him be in the band for the night. And, so he's so excited. He's like, oh my God, this is my big break. I have to do this. And he heads off and he gets to the, to the nightclub. It's called the Half Note. So I like that. It's, music reference there. I love references that they throw in like that because that's fun. So yeah, because of training on the trumpet and everything, I can somewhat read sheet music, but don't ask me to explain whatever single bit is. I don't remember. I remember enough to be like, okay, that means this is a half note, this is a full note. I don't remember what order the chords go in, so don't ask me to do that. That is not something I can do. My dad probably could because he also sings in the choir at church, but don't ask me to do that. That's not a me thing. But what ends up happening is he gets to the nightclub and he ends up meeting Dorothea, and he's just, starstruck with her and everything. And he sits and he plays with her and with the rest of the group. And he ends up kind of going into the zone, which is, where where a musician or someone who is, just anyone in regards to their passion or their, later on in the movie, they give some other examples, like people playing basketball or playing music or singing or dancing or acting or, painting or whatever other form of that, or, people who are, teachers and in their element, or bakers, or, comic book or manga artists, or, movie people or whatever, or just, someone that gets into the zone that is, just, they go over that a little bit more in the movie later. But, he kind of gets into this zone where, he's playing, and he impresses Dorothea Williams enough that he gets, chosen. It's just like, okay, you need a suit, and you need to be back here tonight at 7 for sound check. Was it 7 or was it 6? One of the two. It's 6 or 7, one of the two. And you have to be back here for a sound check and be in a nice suit. And you got the gig. And so, Joe is just ecstatic about this. He's so happy. He's like calling certain people, not his mother, about how happy he is. And like we see him like going through like the streets of New York, and he keeps like having near misses, like, a thing of bricks almost falling on him, banana peels, walking into traffic and not getting hit, even though he probably should have, walking over nails and not slipping and falling, almost getting bit by a dog. And then he falls from a manhole, where he then wakes up and he's a soul. Little tiny soul heading to the great beyond on this like little conveyor belt ramp. Pretty sure it's somewhat a reference to A Stairway to Heaven. And he ends up, Stairway to Heaven reference. Plus, it also kind of looks like the struts on a guitar. So it's kind of like that reference going to this giant, glowing orb. And he meets these other souls, and like he figures out that, oh, yeah, we're dead. I can't be dead. I can't be dead. I can't do this. I cannot be dead. I am about to have my big break. And he's just like freaking out and everything. And he's like running down the pathway, the conveyor belt. And he's just like, okay, to a degree, certain things that you are fine. They use this noise when like the souls enter the great beyond that sounds like a bug zapper. Like that would be on your porch that's like killing mosquitoes. And I'm just like, that is not a noise I want to associate with the afterlife. No. Just no. And he's like running away, and he's trying to figure out why nobody else is running. Why just like, no, this is fine. Just, more and more souls, and he's running and running. And he ends up like jumping off the gangplank and like jumping onto like there's like some form of like a force field thing, and he ends up like kind of ripping through the force field and falling through it. And ends up like falling through somewhat of reality, I'm assuming, different dimensions, whatever. He falls through the fourth dimension, I don't know. And then he lands in this very pastel colored, grassy looking hills and fields area. And that is called the Great Before. And he ends up meeting all of these little souls that are these new little souls that aren't quite complete, aren't quite ready to go to the next world, go on to being alive. And he meets the soul counselors that are named Jerry, that are all named Jerry, which, okay, well, they're all like Jerry A or Jerry B or Jerry C or whatever. And, it's like a kindergarten teacher having to deal, or not even a kindergarten teacher, like a preschool teacher having to deal with like kids. And like they even do like if the kids are getting rowdy, she goes, quiet coyote to calm them down. And like, they're very little rambunctious and interested souls. And like as we watch, like Jerry like explains, we give each of the kids different personality features. These ones are outgoing, these ones are a little bit aloof. All this other stuff that kind of help form parts of their personality. And Jerry tells Joe, just like, yeah, well, it's not like you just like are born, it's not like it's just, it's like you have to be born with some form of a personality, and then it grows as you grow. So it's like that kind of a concept there. And what ends up happening is Joe ends up seeing this giant, portal that is, the portal to Earth. That is basically like this giant hole in the middle of this area that is looking down on Earth. And he gets over there and he tries jumping in multiple times trying to get back to Earth. And it doesn't work. He keeps landing back in the field, and it's like, oh, you don't have an Earth pass is kind of what it is. It's like revealed, and I'll explain what an Earth pass is in a second. And what ends up happening is Joe has been confused for one of these, what's a mentor, which is like souls that have died that then are brought to the Great Before, and help counselor and guide one of the new souls, so that way then like the soul can find their spark and then head to Earth. And Joe ends up getting mistaken for one of these. It's like Dr. Borgensen or something like that, like some, I'm assuming like German or Swedish doctor, I don't know, that was like this child counselor that's amazing and everything. And, you know, Joe gets confused for him and everything, and he goes into this, like, seminar where we see this explanation of, like, the way that the souls are made, which all the little souls, all the new souls, like, go through and they get their different personality traits, and, like, you know, there's just, like, fun little movie about that. And it's like, there are these badges that have different, you know, personality trait areas in them, and, like, they fill this out with, like, you know, aloof or a wallflower or like all this other miscellaneous stuff that all like comes together to form this person's personality. And then there's a blank one, and that's where their spark goes. And their spark is, you know, something that they find that helps with, you know, giving them the spark to want to live. And once they get that spark, then they get an Earth pass, which is, you know, their badge becomes a little Earth sticker, and then they're able to go to Earth. And from there, you know, then they're able to be born, you know, they're born into a body of probably a human. I don't know exactly if they go also into animals or not, but probably a human, where they go through that. And then they're, you know, they're born into you know, onto Earth, or depending on if you want other planets, maybe there's other planets out there. We don't know. We don't see the entirety of the Great Before. And what ends up happening is, you know, Joe is like, was like, okay, well, if I can get one of those kids to get their spark, one of the souls to get their spark, then I can take their, you know, badge, pop it on me, and then I can dive back down into Earth, and then I can, you know, get back into my body, get to the, you know, the concert, you know, to the show, be there and perform with Dorothea Williams, and then like I'll be set. And like that's his intention. And, you know, he sees like different people get paired up with different kids, and then he ends up getting different souls, and then he gets paired up with 22, who is the soul that has been in the Great Before for a very, 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 very long time. I hear Rainy in the... Rainy, come here. Rainy, come here. Rainy, come on. I see the puppy. Yes, puppy. Hi, puppy. Want to come up here with Mama? Come up here. You can be in the video. Come on, up. Oh, there's puppy. Rainy, come on, up. The puppy, and he's fluffy. Maybe he'll stay, maybe he won't. I don't know. But I'll keep talking while I wait for him to make his decision. And 22 has been in the Great Before for a very, very long time, you know, because the souls are numbered. So, this, you know, we see like 3 trillion or something like that, whatever the number soul is, it's one of the other souls. And then we see 22, and like 22 has had many, many, many different mentors, as they mentioned: Abraham Lincoln, Mother Teresa, Aristotle, Socrates, you know, so many other mentors that they tried to use to convince dog behind the bed, try to get, you know, 22 to have their spark, and it doesn't work. None of them worked. And what ends up happening is, you know, Joe gets set with 22, and 22 does not want to be there. The whole thing with 22 is that they are a soul that does not want to live. They want to stay in the Great Before because Earth just does not interest them. Nothing on Earth interests them. There's no spark for them anywhere. And Joe is just, you know, so like, okay, so how can I get this to work? You are fine. Are you going to get on the bed or not? Okay, there we go. Now we have Puppy in the background. And what ends up happening is Joe and 22 go into, you know, this, you know, hall of life where they see like the memory, you know, the past of like, you know, Dr. Borgenson, but that's not really his past. And then like they show Joe's past, and 22 is just, again, it's like lots of like daily stuff of just, oh, Joe watching television, or Joe, you know, eating alone at a diner, or doing his laundry, or like all this other stuff that is just, you know, pieces of Joe's life that, like, you know, to Joe are, you know, kind of look sad in his opinion. And he's just like, you know, I finally am going to get my break with Dorothea Williams, and I need that. But then there's also, you know, we see, you know, other things with his life, and it's like day in and day out type of stuff is what we see from him. And what ends up happening is Joe and 22 end up making a deal where 22 ends up explaining that, oh, I need a spark for my badge to work, and for that, no one's been able to figure that out. No one's been able to help me find a spark. And he's like, okay, so you don't want to go to Earth, right? I want to go to Earth. Okay, whatever. Why you ever want to go to Earth, I don't know. And 22 is great. 22 is played by Tina Fey, and like Joe even says, so why do you sound like you're like a white lady? And she goes, because this voice annoys people the most. I could be an old man, or I could be like a little kid, but this voice annoys people the most. And like, and Joe's like, yeah, I can see that. I just love that commentary on that setup. But like Joe's like, okay, so if I help you find your spark and your Earth pass goes, then I can take your Earth pass and I can go to Earth and you can stay here. And 22 is like, okay, that works. I can do that. That'll work. That works for me. You go, I stay. That works. So they go into the Hall of Everything, where they have like everything that's ever been invented or that ever will be invented. And so they're roaming through there, and like, Joe tries to get her to eat, try food, and that doesn't work. Try all this other stuff, and it, nothing is giving her spark. And like we get flashes of like other mentors that she had, like Marie Antoinette and other character, various historical figures that were like trying to be her mentor that didn't work. And she, Mother Teresa was funny. She was like, I love everyone except you. And like Abraham Lincoln, it was like, yeah, Abraham Lincoln was a liar. No, he wasn't. They put Andrew Jackson in the 20. They did what? Just like angry stuff, and like just funny bits with all of her mentors, with like her arguing with them or making them angry or whatever, or parts of the flashbacks, which are just funny. And what ends up happening is they end up having to run away from one of the Jerrys, and Joe and her end up hiding in like this just a box, because the Jerrys are weird and apparently have never gone into the box. And they go into the box where just like 22's little hideaway area, where she has like on her wall are like all these different, name badges from all her other, mentors over the years. So there's like fun just kind of looking over the name badges. From all of that stuff from over the centuries and centuries that she's been there. And they end up going through the other side of the box, where they end up going into an area called the Zone, where she explains this is where people come when they're like really in their zone about something that they're passionate about. So this is what I meant earlier, where Joe was in the zone with like when he was playing piano with Dorothea Williams. And they see like a basketball team, and 22 says, I've been messing with these guys for years, and she throws something at the basketball guy and he misses, and it's just like out in the real world, and the Knicks lost again, and like like going up, like making an actress forget her line, or like all this other stuff where it's just like 22 likes to mess with people in the zone. And Joe's like, I was here earlier today when I was playing, and she's like, oh well, okay, whatever. And then they end up getting attacked by this lost soul that is just giant, kind of black-looking soul that tries to attack them. And they're saved by Moonwind and his little crew of like dream explorers or whatever that like come to the zone and have been able to like transcend into the zone, and like they communicate with each other. And in actuality, Moonwind is actually just like this sign twirler that enters the zone when he's twirling his sign out in the real world, and he is in New York and everything. And so like 22 and like Moonwind are kind of friends, and like Moonwind and his little group like fix the lost soul so it can help find its way back. And it's like this stock trader that was just like, have to make a trade, and then he snaps out of it when they help him, and he's just like, oh my god, what have I been doing with my life? And he's just like has like epiphany, and then he gets off, which is just funny. But like Moonwind, Joe's like, well, Moonwind, can you help me, get back to my body? And he's like, well, you're a soul that was supposed to have died, so you're technically not connected to your body. So we'll have to find a thin spot. So they have to get in this giant technicolored ship that I love. The ship is beautiful. And they head off. Somehow, okay, I don't think I would ever do this, but if there's a One Piece fan fiction, that would be really funny to have like Moonwind and like his like little like Dreamwalker crew that have them be like a crew in One Piece, but they're not a pirate crew, but their ship is like this giant technicolored thing. That would be hilarious. That would be funny because they're all like Moon River and Moon Dance and Star Dance and Star Dancer, or whatever, all these other weird names. And like they're all just like regular people, but they're all just like end up here, and it's really funny. But they go through the parts of the zone area where they end up finding a thin spot where they can try to connect Joe back to his body. And what ends up happening is they have Joe meditate a little bit so that way he can try to connect, help them zero in on where his body is. And they find him in the hospital, and he's like in a coma on the hospital bed with like a cat in his lap, therapy cat. Before they can fully get him ready to go back and connect, he jumps in and actually ends up pulling 22 with him on accident, and he ends up getting sent into the cat's body. And 22 ends up in his body. So that's not helpful. And, that's not helpful at all. And they do just a funny thing where, like, just like the hole closes up where Moonwind put it, and he just like drops the stick, and he's like nonchalantly whistling as he walks away. Like, oh, well, my business is done here. And then he walks off. And Joe, 22 wakes up in Joe's body, and Joe is in the cat's body. And then, like, Joe, of course, at 22 as Joe just sounds like they're insane to the doctor. And the doctor is just like, okay, we're just going to leave you here for a moment, and then kind of runs out of the room. Because I would do the same thing if that happened to me. Because 22 is just like, I am a new soul, and I am not supposed to be here, and my soul got put into this cat, and like just all this other stuff, and it's just like, okay. But 22 and Joe have to end up like escaping the hospital, which is just funny in of itself. And meanwhile, while this is going on, Terry, who is actually the accountant for like the Great Before, because apparently everywhere has an accountant, and he realizes that the count is off by one soul, and he's just like, it is my job to count every single soul, and the count is off by one. And like it's just funny, and like he's just like so intent on his job, and he goes into like the records area where he starts like going through every single records, like like just shifting through every single one of the records. And like it's this giant, like if you've ever seen Warehouse 13, which I love that show on Sci-Fi, that was a great show. It's just like just halls and halls and rows of rooms of like filing cabinets as far as the eye can see, going on for infinite amount of time, as he was like looking through and trying to find the soul that didn't go where it was supposed to go. And so it's just like, okay, so we leave Terry there, and then we go back to like Joe and 22 that have managed to escape from the hospital. And during this time frame, 22, of course, is like in like the hospital gown in Joe's body, and like constantly talking to the cat, and that is Joe. And, Joe is like trying to tell her how to get out of the hospital and everything. And at one point, 22 ends up getting scared because like Joe ends up clawing her as the cat. And 22 is like scared and hiding in a corner, which is understandable. I mean, like, this is a very new thing for her to be out in this world. There's like so many people. There's so many new things that she is not used to. She's not used to actually being able to feel stuff, which as in like, I mean, like emotions are one thing, but like actually physically feel like pain or stuff like that, because that's not something that a soul can feel. Souls can feel like an emotional connection, but they can't quite feel, like physical touch or taste or different things like that. And like she ends up, being like really angry and like scared, and like Joe like kind of figures out that she's hungry, and he like goes, like the cat goes and steals a piece of pizza and like entices her with it, and like she ends up eating the pizza, and she's just like, oh my god, this is the most amazing thing I've ever had. And she's just like so blown away by the pizza. And then she ends up following Joe, and then they end up, which nobody in New York seems to be paying any mind to the fact that there is clearly someone that was supposed to be in a hospital and is currently in like a hospital gown and is roaming around out in New York. But it's New York, so I don't know exactly how odd of a thing that is. Also, you would think that the hospital would be like, okay, well, we need to figure out where this person went, so we should probably like tell the police so they can start looking for them. And what ends up happening is, Joe tries to get 22 to hail a cab, and the person that walks out of the cab is Dorothea Williams, who sees Joe standing there in the hospital gown with a cat and looking very weird. And Joe, the cat ends up having Joe run away, has 22 run away. And then they end up getting back to like Joe's apartment where, first they end up finding where Moonwind is. And they find Moonwind and he's like on the corner of like one of the, I don't know, one of the street corners or whatever, where he's like twirling his sign for like his mom's business. And they get there and like, they knock Moonwind out of being in the zone, and like he's like, oh my god, Joe, it is you. It worked. No, it didn't. I'm in the cat, and 22's in my body. Mom, I put this man's body in a cat. He's like a middle-aged man that lives with his mom. She's like, oh god, Moonwind, go back to work. We do not need any more crazy people here. And Joe's like to Moonwind, well, you got to be able to put us back, like put my soul back in my body and get 22 back to the great before. And Moonwind's like, well, I can do that, but, he's like, whoa, not so fast. You must wait for another thin spot to appear between Earth and the astral plane, and that won't occur until Arcturus moves into the house of Gemini. And Joe goes, when is that? Well, the government calls it 6:30. I'm sorry, I love Moonwind. He's also just played by an actor that I adore. Moonwind is just great. Just like all this random stuff, and it's just like, well, the government calls it 6:30, which is perfect for Joe because it's like, okay, I need to meet me at the the half note at like 6:30 because like sound check is at 7 and I need to be there for that. But it cuts close, but that's what he needs. And Angel's like, okay, will you be at the half note at 7 and I'll, perform, or at 6:30 and I'll perform this. And he's like, okay. And like, that's when he's heading home and runs into Dorothea Williams and he panics. And then they get back to the apartment where Joe lives. And while they're there, Joe gets a call from Curly who says, yeah, Dorothea kind of got freaked out by seeing you there and everything. And, we're going to go with someone else to be the piano player for tonight. So yes, sorry, man, but if you can get here in a good suit, by time and everything, I can, we can maybe get Dorothea to change her mind. So like Curly is like on Joe's side. He wants Joe to be able to play because Joe was like his teacher and like helped inspire him to become, a musician, become a drummer and everything. So we kind of see that there. And what ends up happening is, Joe's student Connie shows up, who is one of his like actual, like, she's a band student, but she also comes to him for like lessons for her trombone. And she shows up and she like 22 ends up talking with her, and it's like Connie is just like, I think I'm gonna stop playing trombone. I don't think it's for me. It's just not. It's just not something I like. And 22 kind of basically ends up doing like reverse psychology, but it's not intended to be reverse psychology because 22 actually doesn't see the point in, music, doesn't see that because she doesn't have a good relationship with music because it's not something that's ever interested her. And, Connie is a smart kid, I'll give her that. And what ends up happening is during this conversation, Connie ends up actually playing on her trombone, and it actually makes 22 kind of change her mind. That 22 actually kind of ends up like being interested in music and kind of developing a little bit of an interest in it. And Connie actually ends up changing her mind and ends up stays with wanting to play the trombone, which confuses 22 a little bit. And then 22 goes in and talks to Joe about this, and Joe's like, well, yeah, of course you like music, now you're in my body, that that's why you like music. And like Joe as the cat keeps doing different cat things, like finding sun and like laying in the sun, or like chasing after like a beam of light, and like funny stuff like that. And like Joe and 22 work on getting Joe dressed and ready so that way he's ready and can be at the half note. And what ends up happening is when they're trying to, fix Joe's hair, it doesn't go well, and they actually end up running like, the hair buzzer through Joe's hair. It was just like, okay, we gotta go to the barber now because that's not gonna work. And like, they put on a hat and they head to the barber, and they go to the salon, and while they're there, it ends up being, 22 gets, their hair done and everything and fixed, and like ends up like talking to like the people in the hair, in the barber shop, the barber, and finding stuff out about the barber that like Joe didn't know. And like Joe keeps saying that like, oh, the barber, Des was like born to cut hair and everything. And, they end up having several, good conversations with the people in the, with the people in the salon, or not the salon, the barber shop, excuse me, big difference. Depending on the culture, it's a big difference. And what ends up happening is, Joe ends up, kind of, Des is like, I wasn't born to cut hair. I had to start this because I was going to go to medical school, but then my daughter got sick and barber school was a lot cheaper. So that's what I did. And now I'm here. And he's like, really good at doing that and everything. Like all this time, 22 is, experiencing more of the world and everything and getting much more interested in stuff. And, while they're slowly working on making their way to the half note, unfortunately, 22's pants end up ripping. And Joe is just like, oh, that's not good. And he's like, okay, well, got to figure out something to do. And they end up going to, while they're on their way, they're on their way to Liva's, to Joe's mom's place, her shop, so that way he can get the suit fixed. And on the way there, they end up seeing like a musician that's like a street musician in like the subway, and like, 22 is like impressed with that more. And then, 22 is like on the subway. No. Well, not no to the subway, which is like, don't put 22 on the subway. 22 doesn't know not to do certain things on the subway. And like the cat, Joe's following her as the cat and everything. And they end up going to, Libba's place, where she's going to, where the intention is to like lie to her about why he needs the suit fixed. But of course, Libba, along with the other ladies that are in the tailor shop, have already heard about why, that Joe's going to be performing at the half note with Dorothea Williams, and his mother is not happy about this. She's like, you finally get the chance to have a steady job and a steady income, and now you're trying to gig again. You're trying to do this. It's not going to work. And, you're just like your father in this regard. And she's like, the thing that kept your father and I afloat most of the time was this business, with him gigging all the time. And I loved him, and I love you, but, that just, that's just a lot of worry on a parent, is like, well, what if our child can't financially take care of themselves? I get that from my mom. I understand exactly how that goes. And what ends up happening is, Joe, well, they do this interesting thing because, 22, or Joe as the cat, has been telling 22 what to say. But the way that they do this is it's actually, they shift through, because most of the time they see when Joe is talking, when 22 is in his body, is 22's voice, even though everybody else hears it as Joe's voice. But in this case, they shift, and like you actually see it. It's like kind of 22 Joe kind of speaking to his mother through 22, where he's just like, I want to be a musician. This is what I want to do. He finally has this serious talk with his mother about his passion, about music and everything. And his mother ends up kind of giving in, not like she like was defeated or anything like that, but giving in regards to seeing how much this means to her son, and is supporting him, and ends up giving him his father's old suit. And like, her and the other ladies get it all set and everything, so that way, Joe can wear it. And what ends up happening is, you know, Joe heads off and they're all being very supportive of him. Well, Joe and 22 head off. And what ends up happening is, you know, while they're on their way to the half note, oh, I was going to pick one of those up. So 22 ends up picking up one of, like, you know, the airplane seats that, you know, it falls and it spins. And I was going to pick one of those up when I was out taking him on the walk this morning, but I forgot to, because I was going to have it in the video for, like, a prop. Not much of a prop, but a prop. I forgot to do that. Oh, well. But, like, 22 is having this epiphany about so many different things. And she's like, well, maybe walking can be my spark. Or maybe, you know, pizza or something else can be my spark. Or maybe, you know, music is my spark. And she was like, well, you're only enjoying that stuff because you're in my body. You're only enjoying music and stuff like that because that's from me. And, you know, Joe and 22 kind of end up having this a big argument kind of during this time frame. But what also happens is, like, Terry has been out searching through, like, the human world, which is not a very good thing, because Terry is actually ends up causing problems because he ends up trying to drop someone into, like, the great the afterlife, so that way he can, like, check to see that it is Joe, but it's not. And, like, the kid just is, like, traumatized beyond all belief, and I don't blame him. He's never gonna eat processed foods again. And, like, he's just, like, traumatized in that regard. And, like, you know, Terry is, like, looking all over and, like, eventually finds Joe and Joe's body and the cat and everything. And Moonwind had, like, shown up at, like, the half note to perform the ritual to, like, get Joe back in his body in time. And what ends up happening is 22 and Joe end up having this big argument because, you know, Joe keeps saying that, oh, the only reason that you're, you know, feeling this way and everything is because you're in my body. And they end up actually getting, like, Joe as the cat is, like, chasing 22 in Joe's body, and then Terry gets involved, and then they both end up dropped into, you know, the Great Before area and knocked out of their bodies. And 22's Earth Pass has finally filled out. And what ends up happening is, you know, Terry is taking great pride in the fact that he's fixed it. And Joe, 22 ends up actually, they have this whole other argument that he's just like, that pass is mine because you got your spark from me. And, you know, 22 ends up getting ends up being very angry, and she, like, rips off the pass and she, like, shoves it at Joe, and she's like, fine, whatever. And she runs off to her Just a Box and in the zone area, where she actually ends up start to become a lost soul. And Joe ends up saying something to one of the Jerrys that are just like, you know, well, don't you guys assign purposes here? And Jerry goes, no, your spark is not your purpose. They're not the same thing. You humans and your purposes, that, you know, everybody thinks that your spark is your purpose, which is not true. The spark in this is just supposed to be the thing that makes you actually want to live. That doesn't mean that that's your reason for living or your most passionate thing. Like in this context, it's like, you know, my spark could have been, you know, they show, like, some kid doing archery. So it's like, I'll use archery, like, or one of the new souls doing archery. So, like, for all I know, like, my spark in that, you know, in the Great Before was, like, archery, but I don't have any interest in archery beyond, like, okay, that I might try that, but it's not something that I aim for. My cousin's husband, however, is actually very good at archery, and he's been in several archery competitions here and in Spain, where he was from, so it's like, he has archery, but that doesn't mean that that was his spark. Like, art was something that was always, like, a big part of, you know, big passion for me, but that doesn't mean that art would have been my spark in that world. In the Great Before, it could have been something else entirely that had nothing to do with art. You know, we don't know. You know, it's not like you can figure out what your spark was. It's just that gives you this spark that makes you want to try living. It means you're ready to be a living soul and go and, you know, get into a human body. And what ends up happening is Joe ends up, having the pass, and he dives back to Earth, and he gets to the nightclub just in time where he ends up talking to Dorothea and like telling her, no, I am the one that you should, have perform with you. And like, she's like, you are arrogant. You are a jazz musician. Okay, you're in. And he plays, and it goes wonderfully, and his mom and like his aunties are there and like cheering him on and everything. And they get through the whole performance, and it was wonderful. And the music in this movie is beautiful anyway, whenever like Joe's playing and everything, it's great. And Joe ends up, after the performance, he ends up talking to Dorothea, and she explains, it was like, and tomorrow we get to do it all over again. And Joe's a little, And she ends up telling him this story, and she's like, I heard this story about a fish. He swims up to this other fish and says, I'm trying to find this thing they call the ocean. The ocean, says the older fish. That's what you're in right now. This, says the young fish, this is water. What I want is the ocean. And it's kind of like seeing the forest through the trees. It's like you can be in the middle of the forest and all you're going to see is trees, and you're not actually seeing the forest. And you're not seeing kind of the beauty around you. And part of what they're showing for Joe, because he goes home after that and he ends up, playing in his apartment as he's, kind of gets into the zone, and he's remembering all of the different experiences that he saw 22 have that day. And also experiences from his own life. So with his mother and his father and his students and his friends and stuff like that. That's just him remembering, your spark doesn't have to be something specific. It doesn't mean that your spark is your purpose. There's a difference there. That wanting to live isn't mean that you only live for your passion. Living day to day is also not a bad thing. And we see that with like the memories that we see Joe having, and like with, like what he helped 22 kind of see that day, or what 22 got to experience that day. And little things, talking with friends, seeing your family, riding on the subway, getting yelled at by someone on the subway, experiencing foods, for like the first time, or like different things like that. And we see all of this stuff, and Joe ends up, he's playing in his apartment, and he ends up in the zone again. And he, comes out of the zone, or like he's in the zone, and he like, kind of finds Moonwind. And he's just like, okay, well, I need to find 22. And 22 at this point in time has become a lost soul, and like Moonwind found her, and he's like helping Joe try to chase her down. And she gets, turns into like this big monster, and then she ends up actually going through the Just a Box into the before area, where where 22 as this lost soul is like running around and causing problems and everything. And they're having like, Terry was like insisted that he get a trophy, so like they were giving Terry a trophy, and he's like, yay, I get a trophy, because he wants to be recognized for something, I guess. And then they just like 22 comes bursting through, and then they take the trophy back from him. It's like, yep, nope, you failed my trophy. And he like is just like angry, and like the rest of the Jerrys are watching. And Joe ends up being the one to finally snap 22 out of it, because the way that they show like a lost soul is like a soul that has kind of like become so immersed in something that it's not a passion for them anymore, or that it is something that they are now obsessed with, and it's not like a healthy obsession, and they're somewhat disconnected from like their body or their reality. And 22 has kind of become that, and Joe ends up kind of getting swallowed by the monster, that the lost soul that 22 became. And he's like finding his way through it, and he's like seeing 22 hearing all of these different negative comments, including stuff from Joe himself from earlier that day, that have the most sting to her about, this is just, you're just here because you're just, you got your spark because of being in my body, and like, you'll never be good enough, like all this other stuff that like 22 has heard all of her, before life. And Joe makes his way toward her, and he ends up taking like the little, the airplane seed that he had with him, and he ends up putting it into her hand, and like that helps snap her out of it. And he apologizes to her for like for what he said and the way that he treated her, and then it's just like, no, you're you know, your spark is what is in you, and it's not because of me that you found your spark, it's because of you that you found your spark that makes you want to live. And that kind of like makes all like that kind of pulls 22 out of being the lost soul, and like all the Jerrys are really happy. And 22 gets her badge, and Joe and 22 kind of make, Joe returns 22 her badge, gives 22 back her badge, and then they end up like jumping one more time. And 22 ends up falling all the way to Earth, and she'll end up in a body, we don't know who, and then Joe ends up back up in the Great Before, and he's like, okay, I'm ready to go to the Great Beyond. And what ends up happening is, while Joe is like, I think it's while he's back on the conveyor belt, one of the Jerrys shows up, and like they tell Joe that, we're supposed to help people find their passion. And I guess we've kind of lost that a little bit over the years, for so long. And you kind of helped remind us of that that's part of what our job is. And we'd actually, they kind of end up bending the rules a little bit, where they like give Joe the chance to like go back to Earth again, and, go back to being alive. And, but it's just like, but what are you going to do? And he's just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. But it's kind of like I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do whatever I do to the fullest. Whether that is teaching, or whether that is playing with Dorothea Williams again, or both, or whatever. But it's just like, whatever he's going to do, he's going to do that to his fullest. And he's going to live his life to his fullest, while, being around his mother and his family and his friends and everything. And sometimes that'll involve remedial tasks, like doing your laundry and cleaning your house, but it's part of what it is with being alive. And, he wants, of course, 22 to, succeed in whatever way. And like, they kind of got past Terry, but like, they literally pull a thing where like one of the Jerrys is with Terry, and like, Terry is doing the count on the afterlife and everything. And for who's going into the Great Beyond. And like, the Jerry goes, look over there, and then like moves the thing, and like Terry's like, what, something missing? No, nothing happened. Okay, back to counting. So it's just kind of funny that they pull that off, which is just really funny there. And then Joe goes back, and he's just gonna live his life. And then like there is like an end credit scene, where it is a post-credit scene, where it's just like Terry tells the audience to go back to their, this is over, go back to your homes, which is funny because, because this movie came out during the pandemic. It came out in 2022. A lot of the movie was finished up during, COVID lockdown and everything. And like, even on the credits, they say, this movie was made from our homes, more, 6 feet apart or more in, wherever in California where they lived. So, we get a lot of that. Going into the cast, we have Jamie Foxx as Joe Gardner. We have Tina Fey as 22. We have Graham Norton as Moonwind. I love Graham Norton. I love the Graham Norton Show. Just go watch that on BBC America. He is hilarious. We have Rachel House as Terry. Rachel House, or Rochelle House, whichever, as Terry. And then we have several varying actors as the different Jerrys that are around. There's several different Jerrys all over the place. We have Phylicia Rashad as Libba Gardner, who's, of course, his mom. We have, I'm going to mispronounce this, and I apologize. I apologize to Questlove. I'm going to mispronounce your name. I'm sorry. Questlove is Curly Baker, who is the guy that like gets him the gig, but it's Amir Khalib Thompson. Questlove. Again, I apologize for anyone that actually knows how to pronounce that. I don't. We have Angela Bassett as Dorothea Williams. I love Angela Bassett. She's great. Of course, a lot of people know her as the Queen Mother in Black Panther, and we're gonna see her be amazing again in Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, which I'm like, yay! but no Chadwick Boseman, which makes me sad. Is Dorothea Williams. We have Daveed Diggs as Paul, who is just someone else that's there. Several other characters that are played as different variations of Jerry, which they're like Jerry A, Jerry B, Jerry C, Jerry D, Jerry E, like all this other stuff. So that's just kind of funny. And then like a few other miscellaneous characters. So, you know, I do actually really like this movie, and a lot of the music in the movie was composed and arranged by John Batiste from Stay Human, who, of course, that was one of the main things. And then he was also on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert as like his band director until very recently. And you know, he's got several CDs out. He's won several Grammys and everything over the years. He's a great piano player and just artist in general. He's great in those regards. And there's like a lot of other stuff that we see, you know, like there's lots of like just cultural references in this that I really like that they put in there. There's something that like doesn't necessarily like equate to me, but like equates to other cultures and being in New York or different, you know, being, you know, like a black man in New York that is not part of a situation that I understand, but it is a very important thing for me to understand that is what people go through. And, you know, so we see a lot of that. I really like this movie. I actually like this movie more than I thought I did because I haven't seen the movie that many times, but I still really like it. So the next one will be Luca. And then after Luca, then it would be Lightyear. And then I am all caught up on all of the Pixar movies. And then I am going to rank all the Pixar movies, and then it's into the Digimon Tamers discussions. So that'll be what I have there. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching. There's no end quote on this because I already had the quote from Dorothea about the fish and the moon wind about the alignment of planets. It's like 6:30 or whatever. So there's no quote on this one. But I thank you for watching this. I hope that you enjoyed it. And we have Puppy in the background. Can you wave goodbye? Bye. Nope. He's like, no, I don't want to do that. Okay, I love you, Rainy. You're a good baby. Okay, bye.